All right, AMP1 students, we're going to talk about in this video bone remodeling. So in the last video, we talked about how our bones will increase in length and width. So at some point, though, they stop growing in length and width, primarily due to the influence of hormones that we'll talk about a little bit later. But they still continue to undergo changes throughout our lifetime. And so we call those changes bone remodeling. And so bone remodeling is just talking about the two processes that will happen in our bones throughout our lifetime. And so one of them is bone formation or deposition. So that's when our new bone tissue is formed. And then the other one is the destruction of bone. So that's like bone resorption. So those two things are going to be happening throughout our lifetime to maintain our skeletal system. And so those together, we use the term bone remodeling to describe those two processes that are constantly happening throughout our lives. Okay, so our bones, they're going to undergo this bone remodeling where we get new bone formed and old bone broken down. But it kind of varies on which bones you're talking about and how much bone remodeling is going on. So there's some bones where you don't get a lot of bone remodeling and you may have that bone tissue most of your life. There's other areas of your body where you may have new bone formed in that area, within a few months or so. So it definitely varies, but on general, they usually say, every year about 20% of your bone tissue has been replaced, so it's all brand new. So that is something to realize, kind of like how frequently that happens, and again, it's just based on those areas of your skeletal system, that don't see as much stress on them. They don't have to undergo as much bone remodeling as other areas. All right, so the bone remodeling, when we talk about this new bone deposition, new bone tissue growth, what we're referring to, what's going on at the microscopic level, is those osteoblasts. Remember, those are the bone cells that are formed from osteoprogenitor cells, and their role is to produce osteoid, which is that collagen matrix that needs to be laid down first before we get our calcium and minerals to come in. So that's the osteoblasts are the primary cells in that process of bone remodeling. And then remember, the osteoclasts are the ones that they secrete the enzymes and the hydrochloric acid that kind of melt away the osteoid. And then when that happens, the little minerals can be freed from the bone tissue. So the osteoclasts are going to be the ones that are primarily involved in this bone resorption, or the destruction or removal of old bone tissue. All right, so there are hormones and mechanical stress that are going to be the two things kind of regulating bone remodeling. So first we'll talk about mechanical stress, and we talked about this in our osteoporosis case study as well. So mechanical stress is required if we want our bones to remodel normally throughout our lives. So we need to put some stress on them regularly because that stress, and usually a lot of the stress is like muscles pulling on them, and then just gravity as well. Just the gravity will put stress on our bones too. So those things will, when that stress is applied to that bone, the osteocytes, they're there, remember, they're kind of trapped in the osteoid that they formed around them that got calcified. So they can't go anywhere, but they can maintain that bone tissue. So if they feel these stresses, whether it's skeletal muscle contraction or just gravity, that will cause them to send a signal to the osteoblast. And then the osteoblast will start to produce osteoid and make more bone. And that's a good thing to happen, because that'll keep your bones stronger over time if they're constantly having normal stresses on them. So that's the mechanical stress, and weight bearing is there's certain activities that don't put a lot of stress on your muscles, but there's some that do. So like running and walking, lifting weights, all that kind of stuff puts the strain on your bones like the best compared to other exercises. So in any person at any age can increase their bone strength if they start doing any of these activities that will stress their bones. So obviously you'd want to do a lot of this when you're younger, and most younger people do, because you want to build up as much bone tissue, bone mass as you can before you're 35. So that way you have a high amount of bone mass at 35. So because at that point, everybody will have some loss of bone mass as they age, but you can prevent and have less bone mass happen if you have like a high amount of bone mass when you're 35. So that's good. But even if you're older, like me, I'm 47 now, but I do a lot of walking and short runs to maintain my health. And exercise and weight bearing has all these other benefits too, but it does help with keeping your bones strong. And even people that are older, even my mom's age, she's 76, they still can get a lot of benefit and keep their bones a lot stronger with regular exercise and doing weight bearing things. So, okay, the other factor that we're going to talk about when it comes to our bones and skeletal system, there is quite a few hormones that have an influence on our growth of our bones, and also, how our bones are remodeled. So I am going to, in this video, talk about the two that are responsible, and there's more, but two of them that are responsible for bone growth. And so the first one is the growth hormone. So this is a hormone that's released from your brain, pituitary gland to be exact, and it will go to your epiphyseal plates where your chondroblasts are, producing their cartilage, and it'll stimulate them to produce cartilage, and so that will allow for your bones to grow in length. So that's a hormone that's a big player in bone growth when we're young. And then the sex hormones that will start to increase in amounts once we reach puberty, estrogen in females and testosterone in males. Those also increase bone growth. So you'll notice, when people reach puberty, usually they might have some increase in growth or growth spurts. And so it's likely related to that extra amount of estrogen or testosterone. So how those work is they stimulate, instead of the cartilage cells like the growth hormone, they stimulate the osteoblasts that they're at the epiphyseal plate. And so that will help with increasing the growth at the lengthened bones. And then they're also responsible, their amounts to close that growth plate, so meaning that they will initiate that closing of the growth plate, where the growth plate becomes all bone rather than any cartilage left. So they play a role in that too. Okay, now the other hormones that we will talk about, we'll talk about in the next video, and they're ones that are related to more bone remodeling. So we'll talk about those in the next video. Okay, so that covered our bone remodeling, mechanical stress, and some hormones. And I put those hormones that you need to know for that particular objective there. So I will see you in the next video, and we'll talk about a little bit more on our skeletal system.